morning, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you to the panel Building an Intelligence Tech and Trade Initiative, ITTI. ITTI is a global initiative led by ICC Brazil and was launched at the WTO in Geneva in October during the WTO Public Forum. The ITTI will focus on how international trade transactions and even government negotiations on trade deals can be better informed and more automated through the use of artificial intelligence and blockchain. We aim to break down roadblocks to further develop AI and blockchain's advance international trade, conducting research and acting as a common forum for representatives from technology, international business, government, and academia. It's only by fostering the interaction among these key stakeholders that tech-intensive solutions will be crafted and developed. And this is the purpose why we are here today. ITTI will analyze and promote research, and today we are pleased to announce our first research paper that you can find in our website, and also a video documentary that was based in the interviews we conducted in Geneva last October. And we aim basically to develop an environment that will enable us to create tools and solutions that will make trade to advance, helping the multilateral trade system and making trade negotiations more efficient and effective. One of the findings of the ITTI that will be presented by our speakers today is that protectionism often results from subjective, ill-informed analytics dynamics, and that AI might empower trade leaders to take better trade decisions. We talk a lot about trade divide. We had a panel by ICC yesterday, 2 days ago actually, talking about trade divide. But here, the ITTI is exactly the example of how technology can address the trade divide. Basically, there are 4 pillars that we will analyze: trade negotiations, trade transactions, and trade operations. Speakers include Daniel Feffer, the president of ICC Brazil and the founder of ITTI, Rebecca Liao from SUCCHAIN, she's a former advisor to Hillary Clinton, Hoffmann from UNCTAD, Daniel Godinho, he's the president of the Trade Commission in Brazil and also director for WEG, one of the largest engine manufacturers in the world, and a Brazilian company. Stella Loiacono from IBM, Marcos Troyjo, professor of Columbia and the director of ITTI. And I'm pleased also to announce that we will open for questions. I'd like to welcome everyone and welcome also our online audience. And I'll start with Daniel Feffer, who's the president and the leader of the initiative. Daniel, why we are here and why ITTI?
Thank you, Gabriel.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Gabriel. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in Buenos Aires, this parallel meeting to the WTO 11th Ministerial Meeting. Imagine we're here in Porto Madero, and an extraterrestrial, a foreign ET lands down in Porto Madero, and what does this ET sees in our world? What is happening in our world? Backlash, protectionism, countries doubting one each other, each country trying to close themselves, barriers, crisis. And then, in parallel, on another hand, we have new technologies, the same world, crisis, and new technologies and opportunities. New technologies fostering development. People that they're not worried with crisis at all. They're just building new tools, fantastic tools, based on two new tools: blockchain and augmented intelligence. And then we're here to bridge these new technologies with the crisis, with the trade crisis, with the global trade and new technologies. How can new technology inspire solutions for global trade? And as Gabriel began to explaining, we have different levels on trade to use technology. The letter of credit, for instance, everyone knows the letter of credit. Most of the people doesn't know it was created by ICC in the 30s. The letter of credit would be operated within blockchain technology. It's a new way to build trust. that document that gives us the confidence to do a business with the person in the other side of the world would be all different designed. And augmented intelligence, you know, augmented intelligence has brought solutions on medical areas, on legal areas. It's being used, finding new alternatives, evaluating consequences of each alternative in a way no human mind can find. So we know there is a challenge. We're not finding solutions. WTO is trying, everyone is trying, but what we have in hand is protectionism. So how can augmented intelligence expand our knowledge and find different paths for negotiations, different solutions, calculated solutions to the trade challenge? So Professor Marcos Troyjo is releasing today the first ITTI discussion paper, which will bring us to a first level of understanding the opportunities. And we want to foster demand for negotiators, for institutions, for countries to use this kind of technology. And we want to inspire the developers to come to this market and bring solutions and operate and adapt. Let's say, for example, what's on legal could be adapted and become what's on trade or other augmented intelligence tools. So thank you very much. Welcome. And I hope you can enjoy this new, brave, new world.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Daniel, for introducing the project and inspiring us in this initiative. It's interesting to notice that Brazil, as a developing country, has been leading such initiative, but it's not a new fact. You can take Costa Rica, for example. Álvaro Cedeño, who joined us, our panel in Geneva, with Ian and other speakers. He's also leading the e-commerce initiative for development at the WTO. So it's really good to see developing countries taking technologies and disruptive technologies as a way to leapfrog and as a way to promote a better trade environment, as a way also to save the multilateral trade system, which is all, I think, here, all the people here is committed with. So, and I will now ask Stella Loiacono. Stella from IBM, she's the CDO for IBM in Argentina. She has over 20 years of experience in the IT market, working especially for Latin American companies. And it's very important for us, Stella, to understand what is blockchain and what is artificial intelligence. Actually, this is the basic question, because, and this is exactly what ITTI aims to do, to bridge the tech world with the trade world. So this is much what we're doing today as the second global panel. So Stella, please, I know that you have a video about blockchain, right?
Yes, I have a presentation.
So the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, I will stand. Sorry. Oh, careful.
I think maybe we should move over there so people can see here.
Ah, okay. So good morning, everyone. So very nice to be here today and help you with this this debate on how the global trade can benefit from technologies. So.
My back.
Yeah. And this is okay. So we are here. Oh no. Wait, ¿dónde está? Para atrás. I just can't find my presentation. Sorry. Okay. 30 seconds. Okay.
Maybe you can go to the center. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm fine. Yeah, so you can see. Well, so my name is Estella Loiacono. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for IBM in Argentina. I've been working for IBM for 24 years so far. So today I would like to introduce you to these technologies. I think these technologies, this is a great and outstanding moment to talk about technology because these technologies are leading us to disruption, to the creation of new business models, new business processes, and, as Daniel said, even new ways of life. We have reached a maturity in these technologies that are key, like augmented intelligence, big data and analytics, and blockchain, and I could say Internet of Things and other things, that if we can infuse this intelligence, as he said, in our systems, we will for certain be located at the verge of the digital revolution. So today I will focus only in two of these technologies, the augmented intelligence and the blockchain, because I think these are the main ones, the trendy ones that are leading us to the digital transformation that we are fostering, right? Now I need, thank you. Okay, so, but these technologies, they all feed from data. Let's start by data. So data has grown so much lately that if we are calling it like a new natural resource. Data is the power that you have in hands. So just to illustrate this, by the year of 2020, the digital universe, we are estimating that it will reach 44 zettabytes of data. But just to imagine how much this is like one high-definition video playing all the time for like 1,600 million years. So it's quite a lot. So what do we do with this amount of data? Well, and 80% of this data is unstructured. So that means it is, it's dark data. It's data that we cannot access with common systems, with traditional systems. It means that it's composed or comprised of text, images, videos that our old systems cannot dive into. They cannot take advantage of that. That's why we need artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence, and I will tell you the difference in a few minutes. So, so with these artificial intelligence systems, we actually can cope with the complexity, the volume, and the uncertainty of this data. So we can mine, refine, and apply all this data for business purposes, right? Okay. But so far, we've been using interchangeably artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence. So you may be wondering, what is the difference between these two, right? So in IBM, we are the same as the ITTI. We are using the augmented intelligence term. Why? Because we are focusing on systems that are aimed to scale and enhance the human intelligence, the human expertise. In a way, we are trying to complement the human, not to imitate the human intelligence. That is an artificial intelligence. So our systems try to assist and bring more insights to the human being, right? So we try to build applications of artificial intelligence so that we can work or infuse that intelligence into everyday workflows, so the user experience can change and you can capitalize on data, which is the main competitive advantage that you have today. Right, so, and we call this not only augmented intelligence, but cognitive computing. It is what he said, cognitive computing is a system that is based on artificial intelligence and other techniques and tools that allow the system to listen, to see you, and to speak to you, and to reason and learn. So this is, imagine, right? A system that every time it goes through the same situation, it learns and gives you every time a better answer. That is what I think Daniel was saying, an advisor, maybe a trading advisor. So this is really disrupting these days because you are having an assessor that could give you insights on this amount of data, and these insights get better with use, right? That's why we call this, well, all this offer, we call it IBM Watson, and this is what we offer to the market. Okay. So, well, so far, this is only, of course, an introduction of what a cognitive computing is. There's a lot of use cases that we could share, but now I want to switch a little bit to blockchain and explain what it is. So Gigi Rometty, it is our CEO, she said that blockchain will do for transactions what the internet did for information. And this is a quote that we use very, very much because it shows how strategic she thinks that this technology is. She says it's going to transform the way we trade, basically, the way we interchange assets. So just for a minute and to set the level, I will explain briefly what blockchain is. And you blockchain is the decentralized ledger technology where a business network securely interchanges an asset. And this asset can be physical or could be digital, right? But the important things here are, it is decentralized. It means there is an authority or a central monitoring authority that validates the transaction. All the members participating in the network, they all get agreement and they validate the transaction. This process is called consensus, and you will see it a lot. So that's the first thing. Its purpose is to disintermediate and try to remove the need of a central authority. The other thing is a network. We at IBM try to work with blockchain in business networks. That means that we know who the participants of the network are. So we work and sponsor the use of with so-called permission networks or private networks. That means that the cryptography is different from the one that is used, for example, in Bitcoin and the underlying anonymous blockchain. And the third important concept that in my definition of blockchain was that it is secure. So why it is secure? Because every time that a transaction is recorded in the ledger, it is final and it cannot be changed. So that reduces the risk of fraud, and it provides us with transparency and trust. Right. So that is enforced by cryptography, and it is the spirit of the blockchain. In fact, this was designed for Bitcoin, that is the cryptocurrency. So whenever we have a blockchain, the network of participants, they all see the same information. The ledger, this kind of database, is shared for everyone. It is up to date, and they see it all the time. They can see it, they can write to it, and they can validate the transaction. What they cannot do is delete or alter a record there. That's why it is so important, the transparency and trust that this technology gives us. Okay, so that's the definition of what blockchain is. And now I would like to share just two use cases that I found are really interesting with the use of blockchain. The first one is about food safety. And you can see that according to the World Health Organization, like 420,000 people die each year due to eating contaminated food. But and this is a problem because globalization has brought us the possibility to access to new food, more food, and increase the options for the consumer. But what happens when there is a problem? And we have, for example, some contamination in one point of the chain that is really difficult to find. So finding issues with the food production chain is really difficult, and it takes weeks, and it can result in losses of revenues. It can result in illnesses and even wasted products. So with blockchain, as we can put all the participants of this food network in the same network, we are tracking each step of the food production, right? And therefore, when there is a problem, we can easily trace back the food to its source. Okay, so this gives us a newer way and a faster way to resolve the food safety problems, right? The important thing here is that all the members of this supply chain, they have to work together, right? They have to unite to get this problem solved. That's why IBM is working with Walmart, with Nestle, with Dole, with other world leader retailers and food companies to work in a solution with blockchain. Okay, and this is my last use case, which is important, and I think it's really interesting. It is the use of blockchain for supply chain, and it is a work being done by IBM and Maersk. In this case, we are working together to eliminate the paper trail in the shipping of millions of containers across the world. So what we are trying to achieve is to remove lots of documents that we use for trading and having a complete and entire digital process. So to see and to illustrate this use case, I have a video that I would like to share. All right.
The following is a demonstration of how IBM and Maersk are partnering to digitize and simplify global trade using blockchain to create trust and transparency in the supply chain. Global trade functions much as it has since the introduction of the shipping container in 1956. Manual paper-based processes are still common, and information about the status of goods is locked away in organizational silos. Today, 90% of goods in global trade are carried by the shipping industry, with the supply chain slowed by the complexity and sheer volume of point-to-point communication across a loosely coupled web of land transportation providers, freight forwarders, customs brokers, governments, ports, and ocean carriers. IBM and Maersk are addressing this problem with a distributed, permission platform accessible by the supply chain ecosystem designed to exchange event data and handle document workflows. Maersk and IBM are employing blockchain technology to create a global, tamper-proof system for digitizing trade workflow and tracking shipments end-to-end, eliminating frictions including costly point-to-point communications. The collaboration will launch with the potential ability to track millions of container journeys per year and integrate with customs authorities on selected trade lanes. In a recent test by Maersk, shipping a single container of flowers from Kenya to the port of Rotterdam resulted in a stack of nearly 200 communications. Using this example, we will examine how blockchain has been implemented to create trust and security in the digitized document workflow and improve the efficiency of global supply chains. Here we can see each distinct entity involved in the transaction: the growers, export authorities, ports, customs, and importers. Shipping from the port of Mombasa requires signatures from 3 different agencies approving the export and 6 documents that describe the origin, chemical treatments, quality of the produce, and customs duties. Firstly, using a PC or mobile device, the Kenyan farm submits a packing list that becomes visible to all participants. This action initiates a smart contract that enforces an export approval workflow between the 3 agencies. As each agency signs, the status is updated for all to see. Simultaneously, information about the inspection of the flowers, the sealing of the refrigerated container, the pickup by the trucker, and the approval from customs is communicated to the port of Mombasa, allowing them to prepare for the container. All actions relating to the documents and the physical goods are captured and shared: which documents were submitted, when and by whom, where the flowers are and who is in possession of them, and the next steps in their journey. Flowers are perishable, so it's crucial that there are no delays or missteps. Blockchain provides secure data exchange and a tamper-proof repository for these documents and shipping events. This system could significantly reduce delays and fraud, saving billions of dollars annually. And according to the WTO, reducing barriers within the international supply chain could increase worldwide GDP by almost 5% and total trade volume by 15%. For more information on how IBM can help make blockchain right for your business, please visit ibm.com/blockchain.
Amazing.
All right. So, well, this is my introduction. It's very briefly talking about the two technologies. So now I will leave room for the debate.
Excellent.
And we can continue.
Thank you very much, Stella. And I invite the speakers to take their seats, please.
Okay.
And, well, we saw here how blockchain can really impact and cut red tape for international trade. And it's very important to really highlight how emerging markets and less developed countries can be impacted by this. And for the next discussion, I'd like to introduce you to Rebecca Liao. Rebecca is Vice President of Business Development and Strategy at Sukchain, a blockchain platform that provides an end-to-end solution for the supply chain. As I told you previously, she's a member. She used to be a member of the Secretary Clinton's foreign policy team, and she was also a member of her presidential campaign team. So, Rebecca, I know that you've been working with trade finance.
Yes.
This is a top issue for the WTO right now, for emerging countries, for companies that want to export more. It's a gap, another gap, not only operations, as Stella introduced, but financing trade is a challenge. So please, how do you think blockchain can impact and help us to have better trade finance?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me, first of all. I'm thrilled to be here. And I'm happy to talk more about trade finance. Now, we typically think of trade finance in terms of the process. So what is the documentation involved in executing a trade? So you have letters of credit, bills of lading, customs documentation. There's lots of paperwork that can be digitized, placed on the blockchain, and the execution of that paperwork can be automated. IBM has been working on this. Sukchain has a solution for it as well. The additional piece that we offer is a space that is really unique to platforms that are not large organizations or banks, because it's simply been regulated out of those realms. And it's a great place for fintechs to play, and that's in trade finance, where you actually involve capital. So just to give you an idea, $16 to $18 million in trade is the annual volume. A lot of that needs to be financed somehow, because you have about 30–40% of transactions that are backed by some sort of letter of credit, and that is a form of financing. But the rest of them are on open account. And what that means is that the supplier takes on the risk of not getting paid. They ship their goods to the buyer, and the buyer is given terms, 30, 60, 90 days, maybe even more, to pay that invoice. And for that period of time, the supplier needs some sort of working capital relief in order to be able to keep producing goods to fulfill other orders. Now, how do they get that financing? Right now, a lot of them go to their bank or a supply chain finance platform, and they finance off of the receivable. So this is the invoice that they will eventually send to the buyer. The bank will take that invoice and they will discount that invoice. So they'll give cash payment up front, but it's going to be at a significant discount, and it's going to be based on the supplier's cost of capital. What that means is that it's based off of the supplier's balance sheet. So for a supplier, if you are so lucky to be GE or Foxconn, you probably have a pretty great cost of capital. This is nothing to you. But for the vast majority of suppliers out there, the cost of capital can extend anywhere from 6 to 30%. That's a wide spread. 6% if you're largely creditworthy, 30% if you are a supplier, say a farmer within a developing market economy. You need this working capital relief. When a bank says to you, I will offer you financing at 30%, it essentially is saying, please don't come here. So what can blockchain do for this trade finance? What it can do is it can take title to inventory. Receivables, by definition, have to be financed off of the seller's cost of capital. Inventory doesn't have to be. What you can do on the blockchain is you can pass that inventory through the supply chain, track title to that inventory in a secure, immutable way, and at the same time get a payment guarantee from the buyer because they know where the title to that inventory is at all times. They feel comfortable guaranteeing payment for that inventory. Once you have those two things in combination, it means that this transaction can be financed off of the buyer's cost of capital. So you imagine, for example, if you are a farmer in South Sudan and you are selling food to the World Food Program at the UN. The UN's cost of capital is probably negative LIBOR because it doesn't borrow. Whereas for the farmer in South Sudan, it's somewhere around 30%. That cost differential is going to be financial arbitrage that can be split between the parties or given to the farmer in this case. So that is the real opportunity that is unlocked by blockchain. That's what we mean by trade finance on the blockchain. Yes, it's absolutely crucial to unlock those cost savings of digitization, automation. That represents about 13 to 16% in cost savings for an economy, depending on the size of that economy. But in terms of actually financing the 16 to 18 trillion in trade volume, you're really looking at using actual capital to unlock opportunities from using the buyer's cost of capital. So that's what we mean by that opportunity.
Excellent. Excellent, Rebecca. Thank you very much. It's really impressive how we can address the gap, the trade finance gap, which is a strategic concern for ICC and other organizations such as also the WTO. And now we turn to Ian Hoffmann. Dr. Ian Hoffmann is Chief Trade Logistics Branch at UNCTAD. He works as trade facilitation with trade facilitation port and shipping specialist with the Trade Logistics Branch at the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development in Geneva since 2003. Ian, I know that we all know that the TFA, the Trade Facilitation Agreement, is a milestone for the WTO. And how do you think AI and blockchain can help us to develop tools for trade facilitation?
Okay, as agreed, I do have some slides
Absolutely.
to support this.
You have the floor. You have 5 minutes.
Right.
You can stay.
Well.
We can stay?
Okay.
You can. Yeah, do you prefer them to stay?
No. You can see as long. No.
Oh,
if you are comfortable, I'm comfortable.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. So I click somewhere here, so that moves on. Excellent. So yeah, I complement this the previous presentations more from a public sector perspective. And as we are here at MC11 WTO, and the Trade Facilitation Agreement is the first agreement under the WTO actually. So I will refer to this largely. So I will share very few thoughts on the mindset that I think is important for us, the public sector. Some concrete solutions where already today the technologies can help implement the TFA and other trade solutions. A couple of thoughts on science fiction and then back to basics. So let's start with the mindset. How do we set today's rules for the future? If you think that 10 years ago, when the negotiations started the WTO, many developing countries were very worried about the cost of the technologies and so on. And nowadays, we realize they are there already. The important message I want to get out of this is that whatever rule we develop, national, multilateral, should not be fixed on specific technologies. 10 years ago, when the negotiations started, nobody thought about blockchain or Internet of Things. And I will come back to a couple of concrete examples on this. But that's under the mindset, I think for us it's very important when we develop rules that we don't fix specific technologies. That is for the WTO, but also I would say WCO will correct me later on, she is in the room, or UNC-FACT or IMO. So I think that's easy said, but I think that's a key point I want to make here. Now, some concrete solutions where things are in the agreement and where technologies can help is under Article 1, publication, availability of information, trade portals, this type of thing. There are certainly a lot of new technologies that can help with today's regulations. By the same token, the opportunity to comment information before entering into force, the communication tools for national committees, this type of thing. Then most provisions under Article 7 and 10 on the release and clearance of goods, on formalities connected with import-export. There too, I think technologies can already help. In particular, issues like authorized operator audits, risk assessment, and so on, very much already for today's issues. Now, if we think, what about the future? And the whole issue of copies, for example. In 50 years or earlier, I don't want to put here, future, 100 years, what is the original email? No, and in blockchain, what is the original, what is the copy? So there are concepts in some of the regulations that are probably already today or will soon be outdated. One could argue by the same token some issues on information technology. Yeah, what if we have this under distributed ledger and not under some centralized place where it would be stored? So that is a bit like today's solutions, today's regulations. So in the long term, my favorite article of the TFA is Article 10.1. Why is that? It is dynamic. It simply says we must minimize the incidence of complexity. We must continuously review, we must continuously reduce, we must continuously seek the least trade restrictive measure. So just as this, most countries today say we are compliant with this because you can't prove them wrong. But I think in 10, 20, 50 years from now, that may be, you will prove me wrong later on, but that may be the only relevant article in the TFA, because everything will be already taken care of. Yeah, for these endeavors, of course, solutions like those we are discussing will be of increasing importance. So some concrete initiatives here where I think you or the ITTI could join. There is an initiative on networks, focus on countries' trades, connectivity, and I have the link on the previous slide. The slides will be shared, the PowerPoint file, so there's a link to this Global Infrastructure Connectivity Alliance. That's just me sharing with you, coming from not the technology dimension, but the trade that's led by the World Bank, this one. So I think that is an interesting initiative. Another one is e-commerce, that is, or the e-trade for all initiative. We had some events also here that is led by colleagues in UNCTAD, but many agencies are partnering in this. And a third one, which I think might be interesting, is the whole issue of sharing data, of benchmarking. We have a port sharing, port efficiency. There's a lot of things, and it just throws into the room, and as I said, the links are in the slides. There are the links. Now, that's today, concrete solutions. Science fiction. If you look at the share of expenditure on inventory holding as compared to expenditure on transport, this is United States data, I don't know, will we ever have no inventory holding? No, if we just continue like this? And for this, you and the ITTI can certainly help. So one thought here is what I like, and AI, whether I didn't even say artificial intelligence or augmented, but I'm actually more thinking about artificial intelligence here. Like, the beauty is they learn, adapt to new challenges so much faster because one unit learns something and all the other units have learned it at the same time. I mean, and they do not need seminars like our seminar here. Yeah. And then by the same token, you click. Yeah, the whole thinking of teaching, you have to teach values to the systems, which maybe we discuss later on. So, click. It will reach. Where's this? The receiver. The receiver even higher. So, just two thoughts back to basics.
Up.
Put the receiver.
There you go.
So, okay, that was too fast. Sorry about that. So, many challenges remain. That is important from us, from UNCTAD perspective. 1 in 6 people use internet in the least developed countries. So, there is a remaining challenge, back to basics. And the least developed countries, the landlocked countries, they do pay more. This is data from our review of maritime transport. So it's really unfortunate. Can you not leave the receiver or put a new battery? Or okay. So we are working on this from UNCTAD and different dimensions, supporting countries. We are not ourselves setting rules. That is more WTO, WCO, CFACT, IMO. But so we support the back to basics part. Okay, there's our account. So in sum, my last slide, the mindset is important. Think of today's rules have to be set for the future. I shared some concrete solutions with you, which I thought would be interesting for this initiative. Some thoughts on science fiction, hopefully to discuss, and reminding all of us nobody should be left out in this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. And I invite the remaining panelists to come back.
Okay.
Well, I think we covered really well the concept and the actual use of blockchain, because Stella, Rebecca, and Ian, they both, all of the three speakers, they informed us about ongoing initiatives with blockchain. Now we're going to talk about next steps of the project of the ITTI, and we will open for the debates. And we will talk about the future, and especially about how AI can be used by trade negotiations. I'd like to introduce you Professor Mark Troyjo. He's the director of the BRICS Lab at Columbia University, and he's also the director of the ITTI. One of the outputs of the research that has been released today is that there are 4 approaches on how we can use AI for international trade. Business to trade, negotiations to trade, country to trade, and multilateral to trade. Could you please explain us how we can have abstracts, and what are the abstracts that ITTI is planning for the next year? You have the floor, Professor.
Thank you very much, Gabriel, and a pleasure to be here with you all. Last year, when Daniel Feffer came up with the vision of bringing trade and new technologies together, we had to organize the discussion, right? What methodology can you come up with in order for this to make sense for different crowds, different groups of people? And then I said, well, maybe we can sort of make reference to other app developments that we've seen in the past. Take the example of Waze, for example, the one that we use to drive in big cities, right? How was Waze developed? Well, the technology people came together with people who drive every day in big cities, along with transit authorities, right? People who manage the difficult traffic you have in metropolises across the world. And of course, professors, scholars of economics of transportation. It was through the interaction involving these different groups that an application like Waze was developed. So I said to myself, well, why don't we do the same here? So let us bring together the technology crowd, trade negotiators, entrepreneurs, people who actually perform the trade transaction on a daily basis, plus thought leaders, scholars in trade, scholars in technology. Well, and when we started to approach these 4 stakeholder groups, the first impression that we had was that they do not talk to each other, right? I mean, the technology people are doing their own thing. Trade negotiators are locked within the frameworks of the WTO or the many roadblocks that we are so familiar with. Entrepreneurs, they have to survive on a cycle of 24 hours. And of course, we professors were talking about models and conceptual frameworks that are sometimes very distant from reality. So the first step is we have to bring these people together. So let us create a methodology. So the methodology we came up for AI, actually I'm going to read 2 sentences here because I think the approach we had on AI also works for blockchain. I mean, we heard Stella make reference to this beautiful sentence by Gino Rometty, the IBM CEO, which is blockchain will do for transactions what the internet did for innovation. So when we bring this sentence over to the ITTI world, the sentence reads, blockchain will do for trade transactions what the internet did for electronic trade, right? And then there's this other sentence by Gino Rometty, which is also very famous, and this sentence is present in the discussion paper that we're releasing today, is within the next 5 years, all decisions will be enhanced by cognitive capacities, right? In the ITTI world, the sentence reads, within the next 5 years, all trade-related decisions will be enhanced by cognitive capacities. So the way we found to organize this was these 4 sets of letters, right? So B to T, business to trade, in which way companies can seize upon the potential of AI to build tech-intensive solutions for trade. N to T, negotiators to trade. And this has very much to do with those who had experience in preparing for tough trade negotiations.
Yes.
I am a former diplomat myself. I was posted to the United Nations in New York for a number of years, and whenever we had to prepare our negotiating position, it was either going through conference calls with the different government agents, going back to paper, or Googling what we had to find out, right? So in an AI-intensive world, this is going to have to change. So imagine there would be an application developed by these big tech firms that could allow trade negotiators, for example, to use the cloud to collect data, structure data, and provide them with alternative scenarios. This would be a major way in which technology could help level the playing field for less developed countries. So, for example, you're a diplomat from Morocco, you have a tough trade negotiation in Geneva coming up in 2 months. You can use that app to gear up, to prepare, to equip yourself to participate more efficiently in that trade negotiation. Then we have C2T. It's another formula that we're proposing in the discussion paper, country to trade. It's basically about using AI's predictive and modeling potential to evaluate different alternative scenarios emerging from this or that trade or industrial policy related decision. So, for example, today there's this big talk in the United States whether the US should leave NAFTA or not. So imagine we could ask, the same way we ask Waze, what is the best way for move from Bolsa de Cereales to Ezeiza Airport? Imagine we could use AI to ask the question, is it a good decision across the board on the part of the United States to leave NAFTA? What is that going to do to the US economy in a number of years? So it's something, you see, the technology already gives us the tools to work with. And then, of course, the 4 layer of analysis that we examine at ITTI is multilateral to trade, which is basically overlapping the different C2T analysis that we can bring together. So, for example, imagine the WTO wants to better allocate the resources related to the implementation of the TFA, as Jan was mentioning. You have this one country here who's very good in customs infrastructure. The other is very good at customs personnel, and the third is very good at customs software. Maybe AI can come up with a solution, with a suggestion for each country to seize upon the specific potential it has, so that it comes up with a solution for all players involved, all signatory countries involved. So these are some of the methodologies that we're employing. I think, as per the abstracts, as you mentioned, we have diplomatic challenges, regulatory challenges, technological challenges, and business challenges. Why is it important for us to reflect upon each of those? Is that, for example, technological solutions that would be very important at the multilateral level, right, that could be very useful, perhaps there is no business there. It's basically 1 or 2 buyers. It's only the WTO. The WTO faces severe budget restraints. So why would a big tech firm spend time when everyone is talking about AI to direct some of its tech teams to come up with those solutions? So there is a challenge there which has to do with how multilateral organizations are going to be able to afford the development of solutions that technology already makes available for them. The other problem, of course, and we have to be very honest about it, although there is a great potential for leveling the playing field both at SME level and LDC level when it comes to this digital divide or cognitive divide, which is a formulation that Daniel presented 2 days ago, it can be an even enlarger of the gulfs. It can actually broaden the divide even further. Many of the solutions that can be applied to less developed countries are not interested for business. So what are we going to come up with? Do we need, for example, a technological Marshall Plan so that not only connectivity or internet access, but also cognitive capacities can be spread around the world for less developed countries? Is it possible to leapfrog some tech phases, like, for example, the issue of having fiber optics or you know, copper cables? Is there a satellite connectivity that can help us, say, shorten the gap? So these are some of the questions we ask in the discussion paper. There are no conclusions there. These are questions for debate. But this is how we're going to proceed in the future, right? The abstracts are about bringing together these 4 different challenges, is about bringing these 4 stakeholders together in events, conferences, studies. And I think ITTI, by doing this, will end up making a major contribution to international cooperation and trade. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Marcos Troyjo. And you mentioned digital infrastructure, which is definitely a challenge for emerging markets. And cloud and computing, big data can also address this issue. But let's turn now to Daniel Godinho, who's a former trade secretary to Brazil. He's now the president of ICC Brazil's Commission on Trade and Investment Policies, and also the director of WEG Group, which is one of the largest Brazilian manufacturer companies. Godinho, as you've been trade secretary, how do you see AI being adopted by you or by your peers now that are negotiating, for example, the Mercosur and EU agreement? Do you think that can AI help decrease the level of subjectivity in trade negotiations? Or will political economy consideration always have the upper hand over these political implications, these negotiations, trade negotiations that are, and we can have this negotiation right now as an example? Please, have your floor.
First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity of being here. I'm very glad to share this panel with my dear colleagues here. I do believe first that this ITTI is a visionary tool. It could be applied to very practical cases leading to very concrete results. I have no doubts about that. My original plan was to ask questions, but since you asked some questions, I'll try to solve them as well. But the point here, I'll try to make my humble contribution here from 2 different aspects. Being a former Brazilian official who participated in a couple of trade negotiations, and now from the perspective of a businessman working for a Brazilian multinational company. So first, talking about, and actually, as I said before, maybe I should be seated there because I have more questions than answers, actually. But well, being a former Brazilian official, we just need to realize that much of trade talks are not about trade itself. They're about trade policy. And sometimes it's even worse. It's about politics. And even worse, sometimes it gets to small politics. So we can never forget that. We can never forget that when we talk about an initiative such as this one. And it just brings me a couple of questions. So first, again, when you sit on a trade negotiation table, you sit, of course, you have the numbers, you have all the simulations, you have everything there, but you also have, and sometimes you mostly have in mind those political aspects such as groups of interests, sensitive sectors, sensitive regions within your country. You have to balance all those factors. So my first question here, is that the case that those political considerations should be part of ITTI? Is it desirable that they do? And then you can find different answers. If the answers are no and no, well, then you just need to emphasize that ITTI is a tool, a technical tool dealing with technical numbers, with technical simulations that will lead to a result to which governments will then add the political considerations to balance the whole thing and get to the decision-making process. So, and arguably, my sense is that governments would feel a bit more comfortable if this is the answer. But if the answers are yes and yes, it is desirable that political considerations be part of the simulations, of the results that ITTI could provide. Then I just need to ask, is it doable? Does it can be done? And if it can, you just need to send a clear message that this is also part of the tool. And governments do need to understand that. They do need to know that this is doable, and they could be using that. Again, some should probably will raise the question of, is this lowering the discretionary power of governments to balance? Because in the end of the day, it's all about balancing different aspects to get to the final decision in a very concrete case. So again, those are questions that need to be addressed, and I do believe both ways could actually work, but this just needs to be addressed. Second doubt from my part. Is it possible that on a negotiation table, I sit there with my colleague from the other side, and both have the very same tool, with the very same numbers, with the whole package designed at the same way? Just a question. As far as I'm concerned, and I tried to understand it, I think that this is not possible, because each country, each actor would feed the tool with different information, with different data, and therefore the result, the final result, would be necessarily different. So this is another question from my side. So as promised, lots of questions,
Excellent.
not a single conclusion. But now, from the perspective of a global companies such as WEG, which I have the honor to work for, I'm positive, I'm 100% positive that this is applicable. I mean, practically applicable with practical results. And for instance, us, we have 38 factories in 12 different countries. We have commercial branches in another 21 countries. We export to a total of 135 markets. One can just imagine the complexity in terms of, and it was mentioned here, the allocation of resources, logistics, and this. I mean, it would definitely help here. And what I would like to see is a very first pilot project that could include those issues. I just mentioned these two as quick examples, but I would really like to see this working in practice. But again, I raised a lot of questions. My answer to you, I think it can help trade negotiations. As far these questions are previously well explained and understood by all actors. But then I have to turn back to you to see if it's a yes or no, or everything is done. But I just believe these questions help us like landing this brilliant idea to get to where we want, which is concrete results.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for really insightful reflections, And this is exactly what ITTI is posing questions. We want to ask trade negotiators what do they think about using technologies, and we want to ask tech experts about how they see their tools can be used to address all these issues that you had the chance. So Stella, what do you think after listening to our colleagues? What do you think how can we move forward? And I just disclaimer, ITTI is working, so as the next steps, and Marcus will make a wrap up by the end of the panel, but we are working to develop a tool in the future, on upcoming months. selecting a concrete case, maybe in Brazil, maybe abroad, but you are all invited to help us and with inputs and other questions that can be also that can fit the project, which is exactly what Daniel did. So I'll come back to Stella, please.
Yeah, I would like to have the opportunity to answer, at least give you our perspective on your questions, which are really important, and we have to answer that. And I think that if we think of a cognitive assessor, a cognitive advisor for trade, including these policies, is possible. I think we can teach them, these assessors, we can teach them to recognize emotions, to recognize whether a person is happy or sad or angry. So if we can teach these systems these kind of feelings, we also can teach politics. Of course, it will never replace the actual negotiation taking place. But I think with the help of a cognitive tool, you can have more insights that you would never have just you yourself investigating on the net. As Marco said, Googling is not enough. So this kind of use of artificial intelligence can help you speed up the process of having the information and having the insight necessary to prepare you for these negotiations. I think that is really possible. Of course, we have the technology. Of course, you have to train these assessors to get there, to understand politics and to understand the whole network of things that are happening when you go to a table to negotiate. But I think that could help a lot. The other thing is about data that you mentioned. Is my colleague going to have the same information? I mean, well, at least for us in IBM, we think that we have a policy of privacy of data. So each customer with each solution will have ownership of its data and the exploitation of that data. So it's not possible that we, as IBM, are going to bring all the data together and put it in the cloud and share to everyone. That's not the case. We are respecting each customer's data. So I think those are things important to mention that may bring some clarity on the issue. And of course, my recommendation I think the technology is there. We cannot avoid it. It's going to be the future of trade. We have to take advantage of that. But my recommendation is to start small. Try to start building small applications of this and grow fast. But don't try to go for the whole thing together at the first time. You have to go slower, trying to bring piece by piece, like in agile mood. And I think we are going to get there. The thing is, who is going to be there first? And all our competitors do want to have this technology as well. So that's the best thing I think I can recommend.
Excellent. Just before giving the floor to Daniel, Roberto Azevedo, 2 days ago, he stated the following about digital trade. What you're doing is a pioneer initiative, and such as all pioneer initiatives, is not all the time understood. It's not by avoiding a conversation that will solve our problems. If we don't have a conversation on digital trade, for instance, asymmetries and inequalities will grow. So we need to have this conversation. AI is happening, and AI is arriving to trade operations, and trade negotiations. I'll give to Daniel for some comments on this.
I'd like to comment two very interesting questions brought by our colleague Daniel Godinho. Is technology going to be adopted in the same way in different countries? WTO has developed worldwide the first global multilateral agreement, which is trade facilitation agreement. Sometimes this agreement is undervalued. I praised very highly this first global multilateral agreement that is teaching the world how to work together on basic things. Step by step, we will learn to work together on more sophisticated issues, like tariffs, that evaluate each country value. trade facilitation agreement set standards and save money, increase speedity, security, and uniform the process. That's where the path to answer your question. WTO builds an agreement of standard operations on global trade. It can also build agreement on use of tools of more sophisticated aspects of trade. So I think it can be standardized, the global access. The other question is politics. That's a more wider one. And politics can be the personal interest of a leader of a certain country, can be a corporative interest of a certain area of government, or can be a national politics issue. So this process of blockchain and augmented intelligence, when applied to trade, will bring transparency that would be open factually, so the leaders outside of their countries and inside of their countries can see factual conclusions and then take the best decisions. As Jimmy Rometty said, augmented intelligence is to add to human decisions. It's not to substitute. So politics still will be there, but everyone will see the difference, the consequences.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel, for bringing this light about how we can make it more efficient. I'll turn to Rebecca, Liao. Based on our experience with blockchain, how do you see we can have a strategy, or how can we stream information on this app track, for example? I mean, in terms of integrating different databases, we know that ITTI, for example, in Geneva, they've been pushing really hard on unifying all the trade database. So how, based on our experience, how we can move forward specifically with this challenge?
So that touches upon two very interesting aspects of blockchain, and I'd like to address them in the context of the real-world problems that Daniel just brought up. So the first one, I would say, is something, I'm just going to put the term out there so we can digest it for a bit. It's called zero-knowledge collaboration. So what does that mean? We think of ourselves as putting trade on the blockchain, even though we say we're a supply chain company, because what is supply chain other than the international trade in goods? And you have significant services portion there as well. So when you have this supply chain, there's a reason why currently each of the databases within a supply chain are not integrated with one another. And that primary reason, well, it's expensive, but also the partners within a supply chain have information that they don't want their other partners to know. I, as a supplier, may not want my buyer to know where exactly I got my raw materials from. My buyer may not want the supplier to know exactly what my demand forecast is, because if you knew that information, then you could jack up the prices on me. So a lot of this data needs to stay secure. What happens in a distributed ledger context? You need some sort of selective obfuscation of information. That's what we mean by zero-knowledge collaboration. What that means is all this data that you have of transactions, of where your goods are, if you're tracking and tracing goods through a food supply chain, all this data that you get through the exercise of implementing blockchain technology. All of that is logged onto a distributed blockchain ledger. In theory, it is transparent to all parties that are a part of this blockchain network. Now, in practice, that cannot be the case. So what happens is you need some sort of access controls directly on the blockchain itself. What that enables is, even though you have a single source of truth, you have one distributed ledger that has all the data, parts of that data that are not meant to be seen by certain parties are not seen by those parties. But at all times, the blockchain knows what that data is. So you can optimize collaboration within the supply chain, even though different parties don't know the exact set of data. So that's what we mean by zero-knowledge collaboration. You can collaborate optimally without knowing full knowledge of all the encrypted information on a blockchain ledger. That's something that SKUchain has piloted. The other piece that I will talk about with respect to data is a role that the WTO has a crucial part to play, which is how do you establish standards? Because I'm sure you've all seen press releases about banks entering into consortia to do pilots on trade. And the reason why all of these consortia have only stuck to proofs of concept or pilots so far is not because the technology is immature. The technology is there to digitize all this information, place it onto a blockchain ledger, and automate execution of these contracts. The technology is there. The problem is you need standards. No bank is going to accept a data letter of credit across the board because that standard has not been agreed to by all relevant trade bodies. That is something the WTO can absolutely facilitate. I have great faith that ITTI will play a crucial role in facilitating that development as well. So I can't overemphasize that in any sort of endeavor in which we try to bring about a digital standard, we really need the cooperation of all the relevant bodies. And as far as the approach to how we go about setting these standards, I think it's absolutely fabulous that all of these consortia have been put together, not just in banks, not just in trade, but also in food, electronics, et cetera. All industry players recognize that they need to cooperate on setting these standards. The problem is that most of these consortia are filled with competitors. So what is their incentive to cooperate with one another and to move quickly on this? Because again, the technology is there. It's just a matter of implementing it. I think what's important there is the first movers are the ones who set the standards. So the idea is please don't spend too much time in committee. Go ahead and do a pilot, do a proof of concept, get people's feet wet with the technology so they understand how their systems interact with it and how this can be applied more broadly. That's my recommendation, is to just go ahead and get with it.
That's great. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for sharing your time with us. And well, we're running out of time, but before Marcus, I'll give the floor to Marcus for final remarks, I'd like to ask Ian Hoffmann, do you foresee UNCTAD adopting such AI tools in the future? And which exactly would be these tools? And how can less developed countries get benefit from this? You have 2 minutes, please.
As I said, UNCTAD is not really in the business of ourselves setting standards. This would really be more the WTO, WCO, CFACT, and that is actually one question. I think we're providing more questions than answers here, but I think there is a question. If, say, IBM and Maersk develop some data standards models, and we certainly do not want to discourage this. At the same time, once you control the information and the standards, you may then also exclude competitors from using this. That's certainly a challenge, and well, would invite for another long discussion. No, I mean, at UNCTAD, our role is not to adapt or not, but to help the developing countries and smaller players to be able to deal with it. So that's where I see our main challenge. There are a few other challenges. I think there's a challenge about energy use, electricity use of this. It goes exponential. It would be another working paper. Another working paper could be on when it's blockchain, it's really blocked forever. What if some legislation tells you, I want to undo my internet history, and now I want to undo my blockchain history? So, sorry, I'm returning more questions than answers.
Sure,
but
that's
I enjoyed this.
Thank you very much, Ian, for sharing your time with us. And now, for final remarks and wrap up, I'd like to invite Marcus Troyjo to tell us about the next steps of the ITTI for next year.
Well, the next steps are trying to address the questions that Danielle so ably put forward. And in thinking about those, I was remembering this very useful graph I saw a number of years ago that was drafted by the chief economist of the OECD at the time, Angus Madison. It was such an ambitious graph because it tried to solve this century-old question whether the world is a zero-sum game, whether because someone is winning, someone is losing. And on the one axis, you had time, right? So ground zero is Anno Domini, the year Jesus was born, all the way to the present day. And then, to tell you how ambitious this was, Angus Madison also traced the evolution of global GDP, right? So what's extraordinary about it is that global GDP from Anno Domini all the way to, say, the 15th century was pretty much the same. There was no upward movement in global wealth. The wealth was the same. So if you wanted to get wealthier within this window of 15 centuries, you had to take it from somewhere else, right? Either through war or through mercantile, Donald Trump-like trade, right? So this was the way to do it, right? But then technology comes about, the great discoveries, great navigations, the Industrial Revolution, and then global wealth is boosted. I like to see things through that scope, right? That the world is not a zero-sum game, and then we can expand. There are, of course, especially judging from an AR perspective, reasons to be pessimistic. Not only about trade, but in technology across the board. Stephen Hawking, for example, the famous physicist, said last year that perhaps AI will be the greatest achievement of mankind, and it's last, right? Because you can think about the consequences. I mean, for example, in the United States today, 7 out of 10 war aircrafts are unmanned, right? Today you have self-driving battleships that, for example, engage in war games in the South China Sea, and I'm pretty sure the Chinese are doing the same. So this question that Daniel asked about what if the other side of the table is employing the same technology? Is there going to be a war against one AI system against the other? Maybe. But you see, these are questions that have to do also with the optimistic side of mankind and of trade and everything else. If you look at a knife, it can be used to hurt someone or to share bread among brothers. So let us hope through ITTI as well, we have AI as a bread sharer among brothers. So the next steps are, yes, as Rebecca's suggesting, we are working with IBM and other technology companies to put together some pilot projects. I think the first one, when it comes to AI, we relate to the N-to-T layer, negotiator to trade. That's easier to do. It's basically, say, some variety of what AI tools now are doing with legal. And then I think blockchain is on a road on itself, right? It's producing, companies are going out there. The big challenge there is the challenge of inclusion, right? What kind of international financing mechanisms, a part of the market, can we resort to in order to develop these technologies that are inclusive for SMEs and LDCs? So there's also a big effort on the part of ITTI in terms of how to build this inclusive ecosystem that will allow for the more vulnerable players to be part of the game. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcos, and I invite you all to visit our website, itti-global.org. And if you have questions, please do not hesitate to send to us through the contact information in the website. And please join me on a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.